Hey, happy week 6 of quarter 4. So those of you who had missed wire up until this point, you're stuck with me for the rest of the quarter. I'm a fast talker, so anytime you need to pause the video and kind of collect your thoughts, definitely do that. But we are going to continue our talk from last Friday when we discussed dating relationships and conflict in dating relationships. And we are going to learn how to recognize between healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships today. And then moving into tomorrow and the remainder of the week, we are going to be talking about how there are some unhealthy relationships that can turn the abusive corner. And again, that does not happen very often, but it definitely can happen even in high school dating relationships. So if you peek over my shoulder here, I'm showing you some characteristics of healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships. And as we look at those, really seeing the differences between them and how important it is for you to understand that relationships that are unhealthy in high school definitely happen all the time. I'm sure you guys can pinpoint 100 different relationships that you see that are unhealthy. But also understanding that a lot of those things can be resolved as long as you're using those healthy conflict management strategies that we talked about last week. Those of you who are in healthy relationships and that conflict happens, because again, that's normal and you're able to resolve that conflict, you're a-okay, keep it up. Um, but looking at these specifically, we're going to talk about these in a little bit more detail as we go through today's lesson. So we're going to talk about healthy relationships. You get to act how you want. You expect the other person to act how they want. You accept those changes that happen as your relationship develops. You can create healthy boundaries that each person comes up with on their own. You understand the difference between we and I, meaning you don't have to spend all your time together, but you don't have to spend your time apart. You also, in an unhealthy relationships, you want to make sure you're not becoming too dependent on the other person or they're not totally dependent on you for things. Unreasonable jealousy. We have someone that might be a little bit too controlling and trying to make all the decisions in the relationship. We have selfishness and ultimately abuse, which, as we can probably figure out, is a pretty unhealthy thing. So I'm going to get my face out of the way here, and we are going to start talking about healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships. And we need you to understand that we want you to ultimately be able to recognize if you should stay with the person, if you should break up with the person, or if you should never speak to them again or never see them again. So as we go through, there are just going to be some things that we want you to be able to recognize. So when we are analyzing a good, healthy relationship, okay, it's exactly what we were just talking about earlier. We have certain characteristics that we want you to make sure you can recognize. So first of all, each person feels that they can be or act however they want. So if they have a little bit different personality, or they're a little quirky, or if they're totally introverted and not about being around people, if they're totally extroverted and need to constantly be with people, we're cool with that. Okay, so I can act how I want. My husband can act how he wants. Your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whoever it is that you're with, they can act how they want. The second healthy characteristic is that we can accept each other for who we are. We're not asking others to change. Okay, just because you don't like how they act in front of their buddies, that's not your responsibility to try to change them. We need to accept them for who they are. Or if you like they walk into a classroom and they are just a little bit too loud and looking for attention, it doesn't matter. It's okay. So we have to make sure that we're not trying to get them to change who they are. The third characteristic is both people start to recognize and appreciate natural changes that happen as your relationship develops. So if we're talking about, let's say you started dating someone in seventh grade, okay? And now we think back to how we were when we were 12 and 13 years old, and now that we are like a super mature 14 and 15 years old, hopefully your relationship is changing. Okay. Or even if you just started dating a few months ago, we've been through a lot of stuff in those last few months, and you don't really like that. Well, we're not talking as much as we used to, or they don't act the same, or, I liked it because they gave me all these gifts before. That has to end eventually. And we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. But you have to be okay with some of those natural changes that happen truly just through maturity. Number four is very important. We need to make sure that you guys understand that you need to be able to set boundaries, and those boundaries are completely personal. Your partner, your significant other, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever it may be, should not have any say in your personal boundaries. And we're talking about social boundaries, who you hang out with, who you want to be with, okay? Your sexual boundaries, how far you're willing to go in a sexual relationship, family boundaries, how much time you spend with your family. They shouldn't be able to tell you, oh, you spend too much time with them. That's not their call, okay? And again, this is all based on your personal values and standards. Your partner or your significant other should not influence you at all in that situation. And then finally, we need to make sure that you both understand the difference between what it is to be a we and what it is to be an I. You need to be able to have that separation from each other, but again, make sure that you're not completely avoiding each other. Just because one of your good friends asked you to go to a movie on Wednesday night, it does not mean that you have to automatically assume that your significant other gets to go too. Because it is healthy to have time apart as much as it is healthy to have time together. So we're going to quickly go through this healthy relationship wheel-ish. The reason we call it a wheel-ish is because it's not round. So in the center of the relationship wheel is equality and respect. That is what every single relationship should be based on. We are completely equals. Not one person has more power than the other person, and we are both respecting each other. So I'm going to go through this rather quickly. Trust and support. We need to be supportive of each other. We have to trust that the other person is going to do the right thing. We have honesty and responsibility. We're not making excuses for their poor behavior, or we're not making excuses for our poor behavior. We have to be able to admit when we're wrong. Open communication. I can express my feelings and emotions without fear of judgment from my significant other, and they should be able to do the same with me. We need to know that if we do disagree, it's okay. And that, again, like we talked about last week, conflict is completely normal. And making sure that you're not sending those mixed signals. Just because I say something, I should really mean what I say. When we're talking about intimacy, we're talking about that emotional closeness that we have with each other. This is not talking about physical intimacy. So we need to make sure when we talk about those boundaries that we respect each other's boundaries. We respect each other's privacy. I'm not going through their cell phone. That's not a good thing. That shouldn't ever be a thing. Okay? And not pressuring them to do things that they don't want to do, and just make sure you're being faithful to them. And here we are talking about physical affection, holding hands, hugging, kissing, sitting on each other's laps, putting our arm around each other. We have to make sure that we respect their right to say no. If they are not comfortable holding your hand as you're walking through the hallway, don't hold their hand. You don't get to be judgy, judge your pants about that. When we're talking about fairness negotiation, we need to, again, we need to accept change. We have to understand that those things are going to happen as a relationship develops. We need to be willing to compromise. We have to work to find solutions, collaborate, make sure both people are getting what they need. And again, sometimes you just have to agree to disagree. Then we have shared responsibility. We are both paying for stuff. We are both making decisions for our relationships. We do things for each other, and it's not because it's paying each other back. Okay, I give a gift because I want to give a gift. Okay, and that other person might be able to reciprocate, and making sure we are giving just as much as we're receiving. And then finally, we have respect. And this is a no-brainer. However, some people really struggle with this. We need to pay attention to them even when your other friends are around. We have to make sure that we value their opinion and don't just shoot them down no matter what, and make sure we do a good job listening. So almost every relationship that you are going to be in is going to start very healthy. We call that the honeymoon stage. Okay. And really, in these healthy relationships, we are really trying to build trust. We want to let that person know that we're attracted to them, that we really like them, we love their personality. But sometimes over time, changes happen in those relationships. And sometimes those changes aren't for the best and they are not healthy. So we are going to analyze unhealthy relationships. So again, same thing. We have these 5 characteristics. So we have the first one is one person is just a little bit too dependent on the other person. And some things that we can be too dependent on might be money, asking for attention and compliments, affection, rides. Okay, and we just rely on them way too much and we start to expect it to happen even if we don't ask. The second one is unreasonable jealousy. Okay, this is creeping on you, like trying to dig for dirt through other people. Maybe you show up at their class like before they've let out to see who they're talking to as you're peeking through the window. Okay, these are all things that are considered unreasonable. You need to make sure that that green-eyed monster doesn't come out and ruin your relationship. Number 3 is one partner is in control of the relationship. Okay, they might be making all the decisions. They don't ask you for your opinion. And if you do have an opinion, they shoot your ideas down. So again, when you took your conflict management assessment last week, those of you who are accommodators, meaning you're the people pleasers, you need to be careful of this one. Because a lot of times if you are together with a competitor or the shark, they naturally want to make decisions on their own. Okay. And if you are constantly saying, okay, it's fine, I don't care, do what you want to do, you can get yourself in an unhealthy relationship fairly quickly. Number 4, one partner is only worried about their stuff. which is pretty simple. That's being selfish. You have to make sure that you are looking to out for what the other person needs as well. And then number 5, and again, this is a pretty much a no-brainer, but if we're looking at emotional, physical, or verbal abuse, we definitely have an unhealthy relationship and we need to move forward with breaking up. So I think we're healthy, but how do I know if it's starting to get unhealthy? Because sometimes we get conflict and we don't really know how to resolve it, and we're not really sure what to do. So these are some things that you can think about as you are analyzing if your relationship is healthy or not. So we have 4 warning signs that we want you to think about. So the first one is just poor communication. You're constantly fighting without coming up with a resolution. You start to ignore each other, okay? Or you just don't listen. So if you are, if you have your significant other talking to you and you're looking off into the distance and they say, "Are you listening?" And you go, "What?" That's poor communication. Or maybe you just are doing all the talking at them and aren't letting them talk in return, okay? Or again, that constant arguing. The second warning sign of an unhealthy relationship is unresolved conflicts. Okay. So you've probably all heard the term forgive or and forget. Well, sometimes we say we forgive somebody, but we don't quite forget about it. So if someone, maybe the example that we have here is last year in 8th grade, you were dating someone and you guys were on a break because you decided that you were going to go out to a party and maybe someone kissed you on the cheek and your significant other is not too happy about it. And then it turned into this big thing where, hey, they thought you were making out with each other. So you talk them down, you apologize, you say it's never going to happen again. Do you forgive me? And they say, yes. So now this year, you're still dating, and then something else happens. And then they throw into your face, hey, are you going to make out with him too? And you're thinking to yourself, well, he told me he wasn't mad about that anymore. So now you're confused. But again, these are just unresolved conflicts that keep cropping up as someone needs more ammunition. The third one is that you spend an unhealthy amount of time together, which can mean you don't spend enough time together or you're spending too much time together. So we have the girl sitting on the park bench here, and she's on her phone saying, hey, can you give me a call back? We haven't talked in a few days, and I just want to make sure everything's cool with us. Right? She has no idea what's going on in that relationship because they just haven't seen each other for a while. Or we have the other story over here where these two are making out with each other and he's just obsessing. I can't stay away from her. I can't be without her. And they don't have any separation from each other at all. And then finally, as we talked about before, if you are noticing that there are abusive tendencies in your relationship, okay, we need to make sure we cut that out immediately. And again, that it can be emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual or verbal. And we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. So we have a continuum. If you're in a healthy relationship, when you're communicating, you should be communicating very openly. When we're in an unhealthy relationship, it starts to look like we're not communicating at all. Okay, so we either avoid each other or sometimes we just compete with each other constantly. The second one is just respect. We value each other as they are. We don't expect them to change. Disrespectful is that we're not considerate of them or their feelings. Trusting each other, we believe what they say. They don't have to prove how trustworthy they are. But if we're in an unhealthy relationship, we don't trust each other at all. We don't believe what the other person says, and we actually start to invade their privacy because we want to know what else they're up to. Then we have honesty. We tell the truth with each other, but we can't keep some things private, or we can keep some things private. Where when we're dishonest, we start to tell little lies and bend the truth because we don't want to seem guilty. We want to be equals in a healthy relationship. Both people are on equal playing levels and everything is all good. But when we are in an unhealthy relationship, one person is always trying to struggle to have complete control. And then finally, when you're in a healthy relationship, you enjoy having your personal space, but you also can be apart from each other and together. Okay, so you have to make sure that you're getting best of both worlds with that. Or if we're in an unhealthy relationship, either we're only spending time with them or we are not spending any time with them. We're only socializing in either their world or only my world. So we have to think about this. What should you do if you think that your relationship is unhealthy? Well, it's pretty simple. You need to break up. That is going to be how we start our lesson tomorrow. So please make sure that you download the worksheet into Notability and you're going to watch a couple movie clips and define how that relationship is either healthy or unhealthy and give me evidence. All right. So have fun with that. See ya.